Welcome to Immediate Review, where we see a movie in theaters and review it immediately. We just saw It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. I hope I don't get copyright struck for that, but yeah, we just saw Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Alright, so I have a lot to say about this, so we're going to let Dakota go first, and then...
Because I don't have a lot to say.
I'm just saying. I feel like I need a minute.
No, yeah, for sure. But the way you put it made it sound like I'm just like...
Okay, yeah, Dakota's a piece of shit, and he doesn't review things good.
Okay. Alright. Wow. Holy shit. I really, really loved this movie. What'd you think? Just your general thoughts.
Oh my god, man. I fucking loved it.
Okay, cool. Oh, Jesus. Wow. So, I didn't really want to see this movie. I did not want to see it. I thought the trailers looked fine. Biopic season, or Oscar season, biopics, Oscar bait. And, these type of movies are always risky. And I wouldn't have seen this if we weren't doing this immediate review. And god damn it, am I glad to. It's just so sincere and ambitious. It really is. The movie just it perfectly embodies everything about Mr. Rogers. It really does. It's just unashamedly sincere. I don't know. I guess I don't have much to say about it because it's just like I'm kind of overwhelmed. We just got out. We didn't even tell each other if we liked it or not before we did this.
The only information we had was we both clapped. First people to clap at the end of the movie.
And you clapped at the end of Countdown, so that's no guarantee of anything.
Okay.
All right. So, the movie is amazing and heartfelt and emotional, and it's great. Go watch it. Because I'm gonna get deep in, not spoilers, but I'm gonna heavily describe the opening sequence and why I like it. So if you don't want that spoiled, leave and come back. So it starts just like a traditional Mr. Rogers episode, and they use the old 4.3 480i, I believe. I could be wrong. HH, correct me on that if I'm wrong. Broadcast cameras, and they do the entire opening sequence, the whole thing, and it's just perfect. It's a perfect way to both, remind you of Mr. Rogers, if you haven't seen him in a long time like us, and make you buy that Tom Hanks is Mr. Rogers. And Tom Hanks' performance, when I saw it in the trailer, I was like, oh yeah, it looks pretty standard, but when he's actually on screen, he's he doesn't really sound like Mr. Rogers, and he doesn't really look too much like Mr. Rogers. He's about twice the size of Mr. Rogers, but my god, he just captures that fucking genuine personality of someone who fucking cares about the world and, wants to help people and, wants to see the best. And, it's, of course, about him. A cynical writer is gonna do an expose on him, and it's kind of, about him helping the writer to help himself. And I felt the whole time that I was watching, I was basically watching both extremes of my personality on screen, because I always describe myself as a hopeful cynic, because I can be cynical as hell, but I also really do fucking care about people, and always strive to fucking do good in the world. And I did watch Mr. Rogers, and I never realized just how important it was until I fucking watched this movie. That's not quite true, actually. That one documentary that came out, I think it was last year or the year before, there was a documentary about Mr. Rogers. That's what reminded me what a great person he was. But this just once again like solidified that. And yeah, so they cut back and forth between like, you know, modern photography and the old school camera. And I would say my only like kind of pet peeve about the movie is I think they probably should have the aspect ratio change. They would do establishing shots and build models from the original Mr. Rogers set, and it was really clever and awesome. But they would film that in the 4:3 ratio with the older broadcast cameras as well, and then it would cut to like a side street of like the modern looking camera. And like I found that to be a little jarring. I personally would have like had all the non Mr. Rogers stuff done in 16 millimeter or 35, or at least just use a consistent 4:3 ratio. But yeah, since it's set in the early 90s, I'm thinking
It was 98, I think.
98.
That
So
was the date at the beginning.
So yeah, giving it a film look would be nice, and you know, they've proven too with Moonrise Kingdom's proven that you can make 16 millimeter look vibrant, and because sometimes 16 millimeter is associated with like exploitation flicks or like just dirtier, cheaper looking films.
War footage.
That's 8 millimeter usually. Sometimes 16, but still, I found that to be a little jarring, but not too bad. It didn't ruin anything for me, but I definitely was thinking like, oh, I think I would have liked a consistent ratio for this one. But yeah, I cried so much during this movie. I'm not normally like, some movies will get one scene that makes me like, this scene had 5 or 6. I lost count. I just yeah, I don't know. The movie fucking emotionally manipulates the hell out of you, and it is excellent at it. I don't know. Final thought before I pass it to you. Can you cue me on anything? Is there anything?
I mean,
you know, the Tom stuff.
I mean, you haven't talked about Lloyd yet.
Lloyd, yeah. I mean, like I said, I saw him as an extreme version of me, and like, I liked his arc as it's a bit I will say the film does drag a bit when it's heavy on Lloyd. For me, a little bit, not too much. I think it was just because I was really loving Tom Hanks in this movie.
No, I agree.
So yeah, I can understand, like, if somebody doesn't like this, I'm not gonna be like, you monster. It's because it is very, like, at times very cheesy, and very, like, you know, you could almost compare it to Lifetime, or you could put a horror soundtrack score to it, and, you know, you could meme this movie. Sure, you could be cynical towards it and not like it. It's totally easy to do that. But the movie's got a lot of heart, and it's sincere. Ambition. I mentioned that it was ambitious. It's ambitious in the fact that it uses the actual cameras, does the full sequence of the intro scenes, and then just stuff like, there's a scene where he asks Lloyd to just take a minute to reflect, and the movie takes a minute to reflect. It doesn't cut early. It doesn't like, wasn't that nice? And like, the movie stops for a minute and just like cuts the sound and just like shows you the emotion between them, and like Mr. Rogers breaks the fourth wall and looks right at you, and you just, it's bold. It's bold as shit. I think there are a lot of just clever filmmaking techniques that prevent this from being just standard like emotional Oscar bait, or even just standard good emotional movies. It's got a style to it, and I fucking love that. It's fan fucking tastic. It's got its flaws, but Yeah, amazing. I'm passing it to you, my friend.
All right. So I think I'm just gonna start by talking about the negatives that I have first, and then I'm just gonna overload this video with positive shit. Um, I think that some of the family stuff with Lloyd wasn't necessarily done great. I do understand why it was there, because it really builds Lloyd's character, and you kind of understand the emotional journey, essentially, that he goes through this movie. Thought it could have been done better, but it was all right. Next thing is what you mentioned. Tom Hanks doesn't really he doesn't sound like Mr. Rogers, and he doesn't look like Mr. Rogers. But god damn it, is he Mr. Rogers? Like,
Well, can I comment on
yeah.
that real quick? I wanted to add, actually. I almost did. I think it's wise, though, for him to have his own take on it instead of, hello, neighbor. Like, just doing, it would be so close to just parody. And some people in the theater were already laughing at him.
Yeah.
And so if you added that, it's like Mr. Rogers had a ridiculous fucking voice, and if Tom Hanks is doing that ridiculous voice, it just might come off wrong. It might restrict his acting, and so I thought it was a wise choice, honestly, for him to just be the character, but not be like the character, I guess. So sorry. There you go.
All right. So the movie itself, in terms of just those negatives that I had, is genuinely incredible. And while on a technical level, I don't know if this movie is going to make my top 10 list this year, I do think it's probably the most important movie to come out this year. Maybe even to come out this decade, honestly. And to have it happen at the cusp of essentially the end of the decade, I don't think is a mistake. I feel like this was somewhat planned in terms of when this was supposed to come out. And I think that it's really important the way that it's framed. When I first saw the trailer, me and Dakota were like, I'm really worried that this is going to focus on Lloyd more than it focuses on Mr. Rogers, the interviewer, and focus on his family, and it kind of does. But I think that there's a reason for that. Mr. Rogers, throughout his entire career, is completely focused on children, and we were those children, and now here we are, adults, and essentially, in the terms of Mr. Rogers' lesson and his goal and his expectations that he laid down, we failed. There is a large number of our generation who have no idea how to process their feelings and how to cope with these extreme negative emotions, and are in the same boat that
Every
Lloyd
generation.
is in.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
every generation.
Exactly, yeah, and they go into that too with his dad and whatnot, and that learning how to deal with your emotions and how to express emotions is such an important lesson to learn, and that's all Mr. Rogers wanted with everything. And I'm sure that anybody watching this, me included, Dakota included, knows somebody who's taken their life and don't know how to deal with those feelings and are constantly feeling isolated and alone. And it's we had these lessons passed to us when we were kids. The knowledge is there, and there are people there that care. It's don't let the first time you open up about how you feel be in your suicide note. Okay? Just don't.
Well said.
And yeah, I think that this movie embodies that incredibly well. I cried, 5 times during this movie. Some of the scenes you wouldn't expect, like when Mr. Rogers is pretending to be Daniel, and he sings a song about anger. It's so powerful. And I'm tearing up right now.
Do it.
It's hard to watch your friends struggle and you can't help them, and you know, it's like the least you can do is care. And yeah, this movie does a great job of that. Okay, you gotta go for a minute.
I feel you, man, dude. I was crying throughout so much of the movie. And you know, my first cry was a total like Dakota cry. Like sometimes I cry at movies when they're just so cinematic. Like when I watch The Lion King, I don't cry when, you know, Mufasa dies. I cry during that goddamn opening sequence of masterful cinema. And yeah, the first scene that made me cry was the one where he's trying to put the tent together. And, you know, he starts the scene. They're filming the sequence, and everyone's complaining about how it's taking too long. And he tries to build the tent, and he struggles, and he can't do it. And he's just like, oh, it seems I can't do it, and I need help. And he fucking walks over to the monitor, and fucking, they watch it, and everyone's like, oh, that sucked, yeah, we gotta do it again. And he's just like, no, we don't gotta do it again. And, like, I just thought, from a creative standpoint, that was so brilliant of him to do that. And then the moment I had my, you know, cinematic Dakota cry, the realization hit me as to why he did that. And it's before he even says it, I'm glad they had exposition on it. It was one of those, but before he even said it, I knew it, where he was just like, children need to see that adults need help too. And like, fuck. It was just so sincere. God damn it. It really was. Fuck.
Alright, next thing I wanted to talk about is this movie was heavily influenced by the last, I believe it was either one of the last speeches that he gave, or it was at the Academy Awards, I think, when he was given an Academy Award. I'm not sure for what, but he gave a speech about 5 minutes long, and I'm going to link it in the description because it's important. But there are direct quotes from that speech in this movie, and it's not just one solid bit. It's spread throughout. The line where he says fame is a 4-letter word, that's in the speech. The minute of silence is in the speech. He gives a minute of silence at this academy. The line where he says that we as creators, I think he's on a TV show, like a talk show, and he's talking about how filmmakers need to push his message forward, and that we need to let people know that they're special and that they're cared about. And you know, it's like, I don't know, I see where like my life has gone since, you know, I was a kid, and it's like, you know, I feel like I feel like we're doing them good.
You know what, man? You're right, because we as individuals, I don't think totally. I mean, our video we made, quick plug, Vinyl Word episode 3. Yeah, we specifically made to help people with issues, and we have a little segment at the end. But yeah, so I don't know.
And yeah, I think that because that speech is incredibly powerful. I actually watched it recently, and then, like, again, just like this movie, like, it brought me to tears, because it's, I don't know, it's hard to watch this person essentially end their life and give essentially so much time out of their life to help others and to teach others, and to essentially not show them the way, but hold their hand and walk with them. And, you know, like, and this movie doesn't shy away from the fact that Mr. Rogers wasn't a perfect person, and that the reason why he was so good at doing all of this stuff is because he dealt with it every day. And, you know, I think that's a consistent throughout humanity, is people who experience the worst and understand what that feels like end up being the greatest helpers of them all, because they know what it feels like to be in that situation, and it, you know, to be helped, you know. And I think that's another problem with our generation, and with generation, just the world right now, is people are too afraid to ask for help. And in some situations, you know, people have so much help but don't want it. And, you know, you can't, like, and that's one other problem that I had with Lloyd's character arc is while he as a person could be very influenced by Mr. Rogers' words and could have his character arc, I feel like this movie, when it comes to the people like that's the type of person that it's focusing on, is somebody who is angry and doesn't know. And I honestly feel like this movie isn't going to change people's perspective. Like, it's not going to have this profound like change in people that honestly people need.
Because we're all too fucking cynical.
Yeah, it's like I really feel like the person like in my head that I'm thinking of that would need this the most would watch this, and it wouldn't change them. It wouldn't, like, you know, because people have to be willing to accept that change, and that's not something that can just happen through a conversation. You know, like, you may or may not be able to tell them the information that they need, but even if you told them exactly what they needed to hear, if they're not ready to accept it, it's not going to matter. And I think that's a big flaw in Lloyd's character, though it does work because he was, you know, there is always an exception to the rule. You know, there is that person that it's going to work on. And I mean, fuck, you know, we're like, I think we could be perfect examples of that, of people who were influenced as children and whatnot, and eventually, you know, end up growing up into who we are today, where Lloyd, I think, you know, missed a lot of that, and I think a lot of people missed a lot of that. I think that's what this is about. And speaking of that, I'm pretty sure you can stream Mr. Rogers on some sort of streaming service. I think it's either Hulu or Amazon Prime or something. It's there, and yeah, if you got kids, man, throw that shit on. It's good. It's not Baby Shark. Like, it's kind of annoying, but it's not Baby Shark. You
No,
get some
man.
good lessons.
I'm sorry, man. I have been inundated with modern children's programming, and some of it's good, but some of it is, you could just tell, is made by adults who think kids are fucking stupid, and they could whip together the simplest, easiest thing they can and make money off of it.
Yeah. And Mr. Rogers tries to, like, he teaches
He
people.
was not like that, and he always had special guests. He dealt with the real world, he dealt with imaginary world. He's just like, yeah, he was just, and he influenced generations. And, you know, there's a bit of a rant I want to go on, but you know what? I don't think I'm gonna go on that rant. I'm just gonna set it aside. And yeah, I don't know. But
So
I like that the movie points out one of my all-time favorite thing about Mr. Rogers, and that is that he wasn't afraid to deal with harsh topics like death and dying. I mean, yeah, one of my favorites was the JFK one. After JFK was assassinated, and it's just the next episode, he's like, what's assassination mean? And it's like, yeah, it's, I don't know. He just, he had a way of talking to kids.
yeah, I think that is really shown in the first conversation Lloyd has with Mr. Rogers. He's on the phone, and they kind of make it seem like it impacts Lloyd more than his character reflects it later on. But and you know, it is kind of weird for, you know, Mr. Rogers to like talk to somebody like that, because I didn't never talk to the guy. I don't know him. You know, I just watched him on TV, so I can't say.
I just bought it. It was a movie. A lot of people were laughing at it and just like, this is silly, and it's like, it is. That's kind of the point.
Yeah, and like it kind of fit into like what Lloyd's character, I guess, needed to hear at that point. Like, maybe he never really felt like he was the, you know, center of attention, and that's kind of what the call focuses on, is like, you have me right now, and the most important thing to me right now is talking to you. And I don't know, I guess just a verbalization of that, like, focus was impactful. Though I don't think his character shows it. He tends to get like more mad at Mr. Rogers throughout the whole thing. But I don't really feel like this movie deserves any level of like heavy spoilers or anything like that. I mean, we've talked a bit about some of the different stuff that happened and whatnot, but like as for the plot and things like that, Lloyd's character arc, I don't really feel like the review needs to go into that because those are kind of secondary things.
It's all about Mr. Rogers, and
Yeah.
Lloyd is a plain-faced antagonist.
He's more of like a catalyst for us to experience Mr. Rogers' lessons rather than a character that's like important in the descriptive narrative of like just, you know, summarizing a movie, I guess. Like the things that happen to him happen because he needs to learn lessons from Mr. Roger rather than the lessons, like, I guess, are the catalyst, and then Mr. Rogers, you know, reinforces them or something along those lines. But yeah, genuinely, you know, I honestly feel like acting was the biggest like weakness of this movie. Honestly, I don't think Lloyd or his family was acted phenomenally, but
It was just fine. That's part of what I compared it to Lifetime earlier. That's kind of what I meant, although they're better than Lifetime.
yeah, it's like it definitely isn't terrible. They feel like people more than like actors, you know, and like while there are some very heavy things that end up happening and a lot of emotional building, I don't feel like the actors did the best they could in portraying a lot of that. But I feel like the message gets across to you regardless.
What's his name? People are gonna be pissed at me for saying it. I don't even know his name, honestly. But the guy who played his dad, he's not a great actor. He's in a lot of movies, and he's got a cult following. But yeah,
I didn't.
Sorry, don't at me.
Yeah, I didn't really appreciate his, like, I mean, honestly, the first bit of like,
You know,
him at the party and whatnot, and just like really the interactions with him, I just didn't feel like. I mean, when he died, I didn't care. Spoiler alert.
hey, you know what though? He did his part. He was probably very happy he did it.
What?
I'm just trying to apply some Mr. Rogers logic. We're being an asshole to him.
Oh, okay, yeah, you're right.
No, but for real, I don't know. I kind of just want to, you know, we have a trailers list, and usually we go through the trailers, and I think a lot of them we'd be making fun of.
Yeah, I don't feel like trailers is worthy of
I think kind of to respect Mr. Rogers' legacy and his memory, I just kind of want to try to be as like cynical and, you know, jokey as I can right now, or less. Yeah, I don't know. It's just we'll do these same trailers next episode. We'll be back with all our ruckus cynicism. But
yeah, I think that this movie just it has. Go watch the movie and you'll understand. I think the final shot does a good job of like, I don't know, like just, you know, it's just a slow fade to black, and it's not even done with effects. It's all done with practical lights.
kudos to Sony. Sony's killing it this year.
Yeah,
this is
really
like the 6th or 7th movie that started with their credits that's been a fucking masterpiece.
Yeah, cinematography wise has been really good too. The fact that they were able to get all those old cameras and whatnot together.
That truthfully was the best aspect of the cinematography. I thought the rest, fuck, I don't want to be cynical. I thought the cinematography was standard, but
I mean, it was.
It was.
You know, I feel like it was. You know, it looked good to me. Colors were great. You know, and yeah, I just. You know,
in the 480i for sure.
Yeah. And yeah, you know, we're new here at Immediate Review, but you know, I feel like you know, all y'all who have subscribed and who watch our videos and stuff, you guys are our neighbors.
Thank you.
Know? Thank you guys for letting us do this. And yeah, send us some requests and we'll go see some movies. Queen and Slim, we want to go see.
Queen and Slim is next.
So yeah, we're pretty excited for that one. Yeah, Daniel, I think that's his name, Daniel Kaluuya, yeah, I'm excited to see him back behind the screen.
We're going to see it. Oh, last thing I want to say, this movie brought back inserting Tom Hanks into historical footage with CGI.
That's very true. I didn't know if we were gonna get a Forrest Gump reference on this one.
Arsenio Hall show, yeah, it's Mr. Rogers on the Arsenio Hall show.
Yeah.
And then they had Oprah, but that one used a lot of cutting. So, but like the Arsenio Hall one, it was like, technology has gotten a lot better since 1994. Because it really looked like he was hanging out with Arsenio Hall. It was crazy.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, we're gonna get out of here.
Stay classy, San Diego.